Hello everyone and welcome to today's form building webinar. My name is Nick and I'll be walking us through the builder today. Today we'll be talking about creating questions like a medical history section or a review of systems, some of the larger sections that you'll be creating when building out forms, and we'll talk about the elements that you can use to build those out. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions as we go along, please hold on to those. I will be opening up that chat towards the end of the webinar, and I'll be happy to answer any of those questions or go back over any information if necessary. All right, so to get to our form, we're going to click on that My Forms page, and then we're going to click the three dots on the right side of the packet we want to update. Today we'll be working off of our FormDr training packet. I'll go ahead and click that Edit Forms button. That'll take us into step one of our builder, where we can add or remove any tabs or forms to this packet. I've already set up a history tab for us to work off of today. It has just been added as a scratch tab, so all that will come with it is a patient name widget. So we'll go ahead and click next to build. And that patient name widget will be needed at least once on one of the tabs in each packet, as the information entered into this widget is going to be what's logged on the send and receive page as the person who filled out that form. But we'll go over to our history tab, and then we can work off of this page. On the left side, we'll have all of our form elements, and we'll be able to build out our section or our form in this packet. And just to go through a few of the elements that you might find yourself using in a medical history or a review of systems or one of the larger sections like that, will be our selection option questions. And this will really depend on how you want to collect this information or how you want that to be displayed in the export once it's been completed. But to go through these really quickly, we'll have the single select option, multi-select option, drop down, and then our checkbox widgets, single and multiple checkbox. Depending on the type of section, you can also use a rating scale. I typically recommend using the rating scale anytime you have a group of questions that all share the exact same answer set. This will just kind of keep that all together, and you'll have a little control with the rating scale if we open that up and choose the custom option. You'll have a little bit more control over what those answer selections will say and how many of them there will be. The only downside to the rating scale is that you will not be able to add any conditional information with this widget. So if you are going to be asking anything extra, if a patient selects one of these options, then you will want to use one of these other styles. We'll get rid of the rating scale today, as we won't really be using it. I did want to highlight that though, just in case you do have a simple section that does all share the same answer choices. But I'm going to group these a little bit differently. I'm going to keep the multiple checkbox and the multi-select together and our drop-down and single select together. And I'm just going to do that as we talk about these because they will function the same, pretty much the same. They will just be displayed a bit differently, but the single select and drop-down will pretty much be the same widget. These will both just allow the patient to select one option. So the single select option widget will typically be used for your yes or no answers. If we needed to add an other or not applicable, something like that, we could do that as well. And then similarly for the drop-down, I would typically recommend using the drop-down anytime you have more than 3 answer selections, just in terms of how that's going to display and how it will look on the form. I find that the drop-down will make things a bit cleaner whenever you do have, 5, 6, 7 answer selections, such as like a marital status or something like that. You can just kind of hide those a little bit better. And then our multiple select and a multiple checkbox, both of these are going to function the same as well. They will allow the patient to make multiple selections and deselections as well. They will just be displayed differently. The multi-select option widget, while it looks like the single select option, will allow for those multiple selections. However, it will also format itself to take up the least amount of space possible. So depending on how long your answer selection is, if we were to, the answer selection button for that one will grow with that, but the rest of them will format just as close as possible to one another, just to take up the least amount of space possible. If you do want a little bit extra control over how these answers will be displayed. I would then recommend using the multiple checkboxes, as you will also be able to add, many of them in here, but you can also toggle on the show as columns toggle for this widget. And then from here, we'll be able to set the column number of how many answers will be displayed for that section. So I do find the multiple checkboxes, especially if you have multiples of 4, 2, or 8, or anything like that, it does look very clean. It looks very nice. But depending on how you are collecting the information and what additional information, as mentioned earlier, these will all display a bit differently in terms of how conditional information will be presented. And that's kind of why I want to go over the functionality of each one of them and how they're going to look in that finished product. And we'll talk a little bit here once we get through the single checkbox about the different ways you can build out a section like this. But before we do that, we will talk a little bit about the single checkbox as well. This will just be a single checkbox that you can select or deselect. If you do want to add any conditional information to this widget, you'll just need to toggle on that conditional toggle, enable that one, and then you'll have your conditional information section down here. So we could add anything else that might need to be done, whether that be, an initials box or asking for more information. We can add that in here, and when the patient selects that checkbox, it will be presented for them. But when building out a section like this, maybe we have 20 questions we need to get through. There's, again, a couple of different ways we can do that. If they're all the same, much like this, and maybe it's yes, no, or not applicable. If you don't have any conditional information that you're asking behind any one of these questions, I would just go ahead and use a rating scale. However, if you are going to be asking any, then we can go ahead and use that column. And also too, depending on your personal preference of how this information will be displayed, you might like the way this looks better than the rating scale. So by all means, whatever works best for you in your practice. But we can go ahead and drag our element up into that column, and then we'll open up our question. And I'm just going to duplicate this 19 times. All right. And now we have 20 questions in this section. We can then go in to each one and update them with the specific question they need to ask. We won't need to add that extra option for each one of them. And then we can go ahead and update the amount of elements per row in the column widget. So if we wanted to set it to 4 or 5 per row, depending on how we want that to look, you'll always know how it's going to look to the patient as well when you go to the style page. Depending on your screen, it might format a bit differently in the builder, but we can always go next to style. And this is going to be how the patient is going to view that whenever they click on that link to the form. So we can see that all of the answer selections, when we do the 5 per row option, they're still showing here. However, on my screen, they're a little jammed up. But you can always see that live version when you go to the style page. And the style page is also a live preview of the form. So if you do have any required tags that you click past, they'll display for you. And if you have any conditional information, you can test that out as well. So you can kind of see if that's working correctly for you. If it's not, it's as simple as going right back to the builder, updating that accordingly, and going right back to the style page. I always like to point that out because it will save you a lot of time in terms of making edits, small edits to your form. But this would be the first way I would build out a section like this if it did have 20 questions as mentioned. Now, if any of these had conditional information, then we could add that in to each one. Maybe only a couple of them are going to have that. So maybe one of these questions is asking if the patient has, some type of cancer or diabetes. And then if they answer yes, we're going to want to collect what type of cancer that they have. So we'll go ahead and add a text field under that yes answer selection. And then we can ask what type. Maybe I'll just write type, placeholder as well. And now when the patient selects that yes answer for this question, they'll be prompted to enter some extra information. Now, the easiest way and the way that I think is the best to build out a section like this is going to be with the multiple checkboxes. If we were to add a few more of these, So we get that 20 questions, and we can then go in and look at the difference in size here on the style page. Bring that up so we can compare. And we'll just go ahead and get rid of these so we have a cleaner area of what we're looking at. We'll bring them back whenever we need them. All right, we'll go to the style page, and we can see, the multiple checkboxes will take up a little bit less space. Now, the reason that I bring this up in the differences of these two styles is that the way that they are going to display conditional information is going to be different. So we can have a couple more of these here. I'll just do a few different ones, and I'll explain why I'm doing the ones that I'm doing here in just a moment. Ooh. Okay, and then we'll put one on this one as well. Now, I'm putting these in certain ones just to display how each element is going to display the conditional information differently, and it's going to kind of help determine which style you should use on your form. While this style is obviously a little bit more tedious because you have to go into each element to update those questions, each one of these is a different element. So it's its own element, which means that whenever it has any conditional information, that conditional information will be presented directly beneath that question. As this multiple checkbox question is a single element with multiple answers rather than 20 different elements, all conditional information will be presented below this one as well. So if we went 1, 2, 3, and I'll also add some to 10, 11, and 12, just so we know which ones they are. We can then go in to our style page and then test this out as well. So we can then click on Cancer. And so these are all the ones that I've added that conditional field to. So you can see that those answers will just be nice and tidy right up underneath each question. There's no question as to which question these are supposed to be going with. However, with the multiple checkboxes, while it can save you a lot of space, if you do have a lot of questions with conditional information, it can start to be problematic, as you have a lot of these. We have 6 set up here. So you can see that they will take up that full area. They will just stack on top of one another. So if you do have, more than 3 or 4 conditional fields, then I would absolutely recommend using this style, just because it's going to look a lot nicer for you in that final product and in that printout as well. Because all of the other conditional fields for the multiple checkbox will just build out on top of each other like this, and you won't have the opportunity to format the way that those answers are presented. That being said, the multiple checkboxes element is the best option for any section with a ton of questions that don't have a lot of conditional information. When using this style too, I do recommend tagging each one of these conditional fields for whatever question it's going with. So if you were using this one and that first option was cancer, I would title this one, type of cancer. If the next one was diabetes, type of diabetes, whatever information you're trying to collect from that patient, just to let them know exactly what question that conditional information is tied to. But again, if you're going to have many conditional fields in a section like that, I absolutely recommend using this style. You can also use this with the single checkboxes as well, if you prefer the way that those the checkbox looks instead. And then you can always come in here as well. If you prefer this to be a drop-down, you can always just go in, open up each one of these widgets, and then select from that field type. You can change what type of element this is between those 4 elements. You won't be able to change this into a single checkbox, so you would need to rebuild that or build it out in a checkbox style in the first place if you prefer it that way. But you can always come in here and update these widgets as needed. If you decide that one needs to be a multiple select instead of a single select, and you've already built it, all you need to do is open up that widget, go to the field type, and then you can change it to a multi-select or a multiple checkbox, depending on how you want that to be displayed. But you can always come in here and update the functionality of these widgets on the fly as well. And again, it will come down to how you prefer the form to look and what's easiest to collect that information from your patients, because as always, a form that's easily navigated and looks nice and makes a lot of sense will have a lot more of those questions filled out if they aren't required. Otherwise, you can absolutely just make each question required, and the patient will need to fill out that field before they're allowed to submit the form. It's much easier with the multiple checkboxes when you're asking for a requirement, because you can require it here, and then they'll be forced to select something from this list. They'll only need to make one selection to fulfill that requirement. However, in the case like this, I would always also recommend adding an option that would be, none of the above or none or something like that, just to give the patient some kind of out whenever they don't have any of those symptoms or don't have a yes to any one of these questions that may be being asked. And then that way, if you can absolutely require this question, and then all they'll need to do is select that none, instead of being forced to make a selection and then explaining that to you after the fact. All right. And then similarly, we'll just talk a little bit about the single checkbox. I'll build out a small section as well, just to show you the difference in those with the single select option. But for this one, we will build this out as if each question is asking for some extra information. So we will use that duplicate function again. However, this time, we're going to go ahead and add our conditional information ahead of time. That way, each one that's duplicated will already have that information. So maybe this is like a describe field or something like that. And then now we can duplicate this out. I'm just going to do 10 for this example, and then we can make that 5 wide. And now if we go to that style page, each one of these will already have that conditional information set up for us, and we just need to go in and update the title of each one of these questions. All right. I'm going to go ahead and open up that chat just in case we do have any questions today. I know we are running a little bit close to the end here. And in the meantime, we'll talk about the style page again. We'll go ahead and go over to our style page. And before we move past this, just to talk about the other functionalities of the style page, I always do harp on the fact that it's a live preview of the form, as I do find that incredibly helpful in terms of testing and building forms. But you can also update the style of the packets here as well. You can update your logo, of course. Any image file will do here. If you do not have a logo file uploaded, it will default to your account name, and then that packet title will always be on the right side of that header. You can turn the header off if you would like by turning off that visibility toggle, which will be your first one available. And then you'll have some other options in terms of how that form will look for you. For instance, we can update our option selected color if we wanted that to be different, so that when a patient selects one of those selections, it won't be just black like this. We can make this a little bit more close to the colors that you use for your practice, or for your logo, or whatever that may be. Change your background color. If you do know that specific hex code, you can put that in, and that will go directly to that color. Otherwise, you can just use the slider or the color picker to slide around and find something that looks good with your uploaded image. And then, of course, if you have multiple packets in your account and you've gone through and spent a lot of time styling this out and changed a lot of things, you'll only need to save that one packet. And then each packet that you have in your account other than that, you can just come to the style page and you'll have the import styles section available as well. The moment you add a second packet or have multiple packets in your account, this section will become available to you, and it will be at the top. And then from here, all you'll need to do is just select from this dropdown the packet that you've already styled in your account, and then you can import that styling over, and it will bring over the logo, background color, and any styling changes that you've made as well. So that can save you a lot of time in terms of styling your forms. And then from here, once we have this all set up, we'll go ahead and click next to publish. That will take us to the published page. It says published, but we have one more step to go before this form is live. And this will just give us one last opportunity to collect any of this other information that we might need from this packet, or change the packet name itself as well. Just make sure to click that Save Name button if you do update the packet name. And then from here, we'll just need to click that My Account or the Finish Building Back to My Account button. That will take us back to the the Send and Receive page. And once we're here, we'll know that those changes have been saved and published as that form's latest version, and we can now go back to the My Forms page and click on that public link of the form to go see a live version of it. So we have all of our changes made, our different sections built out, and we're good to go. All right, but it doesn't look like we have any questions today. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Just as a reminder of these form building webinars, this will conclude our February webinar series. However, if you would like to keep up with the schedule for March, you can always find that by going to My Account, Support, and clicking on that Search Guide button. Once you're at the product guide, you can go to FormDr Updates here at the bottom right, and we have our webinar schedules posted here on the left side. So we can go to the March 2023 webinar schedule. We'll have our onboarding schedule. All of the onboarding webinars will be held Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. That schedule won't change too much. However, the form building webinars, which will be held every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, those will change, and you can keep up with the schedule of what we'll be talking about here on this page. And so if you do see anything that you would like to be in attendance for, you can see that information here. And if there's something that you would like to be in attendance for, but for some reason won't be able to be, don't fret. We will be posting these as videos after the fact as well. If we go to our February, for instance, you'll be able to tell which ones have been posted, and clicking on that link will take you right to that YouTube page, and we'll have timestamps and everything as well for you. So if you do miss anything, just keep an eye on that page. We will be posting it as soon as we have that ready. But thanks again, everybody, for joining us. That will conclude it for today. Hope to see you again next time, and hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.